gavel. All right. The meeting of the South Hunterdon Regional Board of Education is called to order. Adequate notice as required by the Open Public Meetings Act was provided on December 10th, 2020 by posting the notice with the respective clerks of the City of Lambertville, Borough of Stockton, and Township of West Faneuil, and advertised on December 3rd, 2020 in the Hunterdon County Democrat and Trenton Times newspaper. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so first up we have a special event as part of our agenda. We're actually going to be swearing in a new board member, Martha Dennis, who is taking over a position that was vacated. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Harris, and he's going to walk us through the oath of office.
All right, Mr. Dennis. All right, if you'll repeat after me. I, Martha Dennis, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
I, Martha Dennis, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
And that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the government established in this state and the authority of the people.
I, Martha Dennis, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of the Board of Education.
I, Martha Dennis, do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of the Board of Education.
And that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19-4-1, nor disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense listed in New Jersey S 18A 12-1.
And that I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to statute 19-4-1 or disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense listed in New Jersey statute 18A 12-1.
And that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all duties of that office according to the best of my ability.
And I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability.
This is sworn and ascribed before me this 23rd day of August 2021. Congratulations.
Welcome, Martha.
All right, roll call. Lauren Brunstrom-Fells.
Here.
Martha Dennis.
Here.
Gallagher.
Here.
Tracy Petrucci.
Here.
Diana Purcell.
Here.
Donnie Tamarino.
Here.
Megan Warner.
Here.
Bartolomina Hengst. Kevin Kowaleski.
Here. All right, just a reminder to everyone as we get started, we are live streaming our meeting, so obviously we have folks watching at home, so for our board members, if you could make sure you speak as loud as you can for the microphone, and then we also have a microphone tonight for public comment. But we'll start out first. Do we have a PTO update?
Hi everyone, Jessica Hardigan, West Amwell PTO. We've been really busy this past month planning for the new school year. Thanks to parent volunteers, we assembled our TerraCycle garden that we won last year in our contest, where families pledged online to conserve water, and we ended up with a really cool garden and gazebo. We were also able to do a makeover of our courtyard at the school thanks to the late Billy Hodge. His kindness has opened up a new outdoor learning space for our students. We are really looking forward to the start of the school year. We have some upcoming events. This Thursday, we welcome back our teachers with the Welcome Back to School teacher luncheon that the PTO provides for teachers and staff. We have our Break the Ice social. That's also Thursday in the evening at 5:30 for all of our incoming kindergarten families. So they come, they play, they have Kona Ice, then the parents are able to go in, have their meeting, and kids get to meet their teachers and their peers. It's really nice. On September 9th at 5:30, we have our 6th grade roller skating fundraiser at the Frenchtown Roller Rink. Tickets can be bought on our platform membership toolkit. And then September 24th, we have our first ever outdoor movie night at West Amwell School. The movie is to be determined, but the admission is free. Families can reserve pizzas online. Doors open at 6:30. Again, they can be reserved with membership toolkit. That's all.
Movie night date again? The movie night?
Oh, September 24th. And doors open at 6:30.
Got it.
PTA?
Stephanie Ballmer, Lambertville PTA. I'm actually the new president this year, and I wanted to mention that we have a whole new board. Gina Fischetti is our new vice president, Puneet Rao is our treasurer, and Mara Lewis is our new secretary. So one of us will try to be here at every meeting to make a report, and I'm really grateful to all of them for volunteering for a leadership role at the PTA. We had our first meeting on August 9th, and we're starting our planning for the year. We have our luncheon this week for the teachers. Next Tuesday, we're doing new family orientation for our pre-K and kinder families, for any families new to the district and older students as well. And we're also doing a tour for families who came in the last year and a half, who may not have had a chance to get to know the school. I don't want to call them COVID families, but for the families that came in new to the district this past year. So that's happening between 9 and 11 on Tuesday. Emails were sent out, but if anyone can spread that word, so we want to make sure that people feel connected to the school. We're doing some form of our annual ice cream social on September 10th. Still to be determined a little bit what that will look like. Our spirit store, we've been hard at work getting some new items for the spirit store, and that will be open right when school opens, so keep an eye out for some new LPS spiritware. Our next meeting is September 8th at 7 o'clock. And picture day, just to mark your calendars, is September 24th. Thanks. Great to see you all.
Do we have anyone from the LAEF?
We need a resolution or a motion to approve the minutes from July 26th.
Second.
Voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Sorry, Kevin. All opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
All right, so time for my update. So I do have some slides, and I'll remind everyone who's watching at home that it is on the agenda actually, but I will be sending it out as well tomorrow to all parents. The one thing I do want to just mention before I start, you probably noticed our new platform that we're using for our board meetings. So hopefully you received information from me last Friday that kind of walks you through. If you go to the welcome page, you can kind of see our new district shield, which is on there, and then also just information about all of our upcoming meetings. And then when you click on meetings, you'll see any meetings that will be coming up. Typically the Friday before a Monday meeting, the agenda will be live for the public to be able to view. There is a video feature right here. So if you want to watch it from home and you just go into the agenda and click on that, it will take you right to the video feed, which makes it nice and convenient. And then all of our policies are also still available here on the right-hand side. You'll be able to see all that information that you had access to before. So I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview and let you know that moving forward, we will be using that as our main platform for all of our board meetings. All right, so I wanted to first give an update about the referendum. So a couple things. We had some great news with the referendum. So we found out a few weeks ago that we received $6,763,993 in debt relief from the DOE to be put towards our referendum. Why is that important? Well, when we did all of our estimations for the state aid that we would get, we were anticipating we would probably get about $5.5 million. So the fact that we got 6.7 is great news because that takes our cost. We were about 27.5, 27.8 on the total number. That brings it below 27 million to that number that you see there. So that is great news. That is in writing from the state. So that is official. The board will be approving that this evening. On our agenda, we have a resolution. for the board to officially accept that money from the state for the referendum, and then also to approve what will actually appear on the ballot for November 2nd. So you can see that on our agenda. And then we've updated our tax calculator with the final number. So if you had used that, calculation maybe a month or so ago, you would want to go back and do it again because obviously it's going to be less money than it was before. Also, trying to make it easy for folks to get information. So if you just do shrsd.org/referendum, that will take you right to our referendum page with all the information about it. A couple other things to mention. Have you seen our referendum video? All right, so I sent that out about a week ago. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. It is here. If you click on that in the slide deck that I'll be sending out, it's also all over our website. There's also an FAQ that was sent out, which you can click here if you haven't seen it. There's upcoming referendum sessions, so I'll be kind of on tour in September and October at a lot of different places within all three of our communities. So that's an opportunity for you to spend some time with me, ask questions, anything that you want to talk about in reference to the referendum. We're also scheduling on Saturday, September 18th and Saturday, October 16th, tours of the LPS building as well as the West Amwell building. So I will be bouncing between both buildings. Our principals, Ms. Quinones and Mr. Miller, will be at both of their buildings. And it will provide an opportunity for folks in the community maybe who have not been in the buildings in a while, or ever for that matter, to come in and kind of see some of the challenges that we're dealing with that would be addressed in the referendum. And then we do have a QR code. So if you scan that QR code, it's going to take you right to the referendum homepage. And obviously all the information that was available and has been available related to the referendum can be found there. So you'll be hearing more information. There's more videos that we'll be sending out, other things, just reminding folks the importance of this referendum on November 2nd as we lead up to that. So that's an update on our referendum. All right, so the majority of tonight is all about our reopening plan. We are starting school on Wednesday, September 1st, and these are different documents, and there's links to each one that provide guidance that we followed as far as our reopening. So you should know I've shared the road forward in the past. It came out in June. There was a revision literally that was sent out about noontime on Friday from the Department of Education. And there are some changes that I've highlighted in my slide deck. We've been using the weekly COVID statistics. You're probably familiar with this. So this comes out every Thursday from the Department of Health. And if you look at where we are, the last Thursday that it came out, you can see where the state of New Jersey, for the first time, we did show some orange, not in Hunterdon County, but we did show some orange as far as the state goes. So that's an important document. Hunterdon County statistics. So that's another one that if you're not familiar with, you can drill down by each municipality. So I've been keeping track of these numbers to kind of see where we are as far as different municipalities and how many cases and whether or not they're growing, they're not growing. So I'm keeping a close eye on this on week to week. So this is a nice tool because it drills it right down to the municipality. You can kind of see where we are right now in our different municipalities. And then there's CDC guidance, which obviously follow, and then the executive order, which you're probably all familiar with now, that came out from the governor on, I think it was August 6th, about masking both during the day inside school buildings as well as transportation on buses to and from school, as well as on all of our athletic grounds where a mask is required. So a lot of different pieces of data driving all of our decisions. Now, one thing I do want to explain, so there's been a lot of back and forth of New Jersey's in red, New Jersey's in yellow, New Jersey's in red. So I do want to explain that there are really two different metrics that are out there right now. The CDC one is basically fairly new. It just came out several weeks ago, and it's broken down by 4 levels: blue, yellow, orange, and red. And it's based purely on the positivity rate and total number of new cases on a 7-day time period. And it reports down to the county level. So according to that document, we are in red, all right? In actually all New Jersey is in red right now. Almost all the United States is in red right now. And then there's the NJDOH. So that's the New Jersey Department of Health, the Cali And it has also 4 levels and colors: green, yellow, orange, and red. Now, it does it a little bit differently. It's based on positivity rate, hospital activity, so in other words, out of those positive cases, how many of those individuals are actually winding up in the hospital, and then average of new cases per 100,000. It also reports down to Tri-County region, so we are Central West, and it reports us with Somerset and Mercer counties. So we've been using the NJDOH for the last 18 months. So just had a meeting last week with Karen DeMarco from our health department, and basically at this point we continue to follow the yellow and the NJDOH, Department of Health. So right now we are in yellow. Like I said, obviously some areas in New Jersey went into orange, so we'll kind of see how that plays out. But that's really the tool that we're using, and that comes out usually by about lunchtime every Thursday, so we're always tuned in to kind of see how that plays out. All right, so I think it's important for you to know what would happen based on Executive Order 251 if the Board of Education or staff members just decided all of a sudden that, you know, that's great and all with the executive order, but we're not going to follow it. So realize that, and this comes right from our attorneys, our district attorneys, that EO 251 does have the force of law, meaning board members, administrators, teachers, and parents are under legal duty to comply with the mandate. Those who violate the executive order are deemed to have committed an unlawful act that is subject to a prison term of up to 6 months, a fine of $1,000 or both, and it's in the discretion of the court. So this really is a law that all of us as a district and all districts in the state of New Jersey right now need to follow. All right, so what does our reopening plan look like? So we will be returning back to full day schedule for all of our students. So come September 1st, it will be a full day. We'll be using the schedule that we used before COVID, pre-COVID, at all levels. As I just mentioned, as per the governor's executive order, students will be required to wear a mask while in the building and also on a school bus. As I mentioned before, whether it's to and from school or athletic events or extracurricular activities. They will not be required to wear a mask while outside of the building when eating, snack or lunch, or when participating in high-intensity activities. So, for example, our physical education classes. When in phys ed classes, if they're taking place inside, and let's say we're doing those high-intensity activities and students are not wearing a mask, we will make sure that they're 6 feet apart, and we will make sure that the areas are well ventilated in our gym. No mask will also be worn in an activity it's engaged for that cannot be performed without wearing a mask. So, for example, if you play an instrument and you're in our band, and obviously you can't put the instrument in your mouth because of the mask, you are permitted to remove that mask in order to be able to play that instrument. And since our schedule will be full day, we will build in as many mask breaks as we can throughout the school day, because obviously we're going now from a 4-hour day back to our normal school day, full day. So we will, once again, although I'm sure by this point all of our students have a mask, we will be providing the first day of school all of our students with their school masks with their logos on it that they can utilize on a daily basis. So screening. So last year, remember, we had the COVID app where parents were required and staff members on an every morning basis to report in and kind of do a check-off. We will not be using that this year. However, I want to make it clear for parents that if their child wakes up in the morning and they're not feeling well, and either one of these bullets come into play, so at least 2 of the following symptoms in the first bullet or 1 of the symptoms in the second bullet, they should not send their child to school that day. And they should reach out to the nurse, their school nurse, and the school nurse will kind of walk them through the next steps. If during the school day, for whatever reason, some of these things that are on the bullet points come into play, 2 or more on the first one or 1 on the second one, obviously we'll be isolating students. We have an isolation room just like we did last year, and then we will be reaching out to parents to come pick up their child and then following the exclusionary rules, which I'll get into in a second. Social distancing. So within classrooms, we're going to maintain 3 feet of physical distancing to the greatest extent practical while offering full-time in-person learning to all of our students. So obviously all of our students are back. We're going to do the best we possibly can in each one of our learning spaces to keep that 3 feet of social distancing. Outside of classrooms, so whether it's hallways or locker rooms or in the passing time when kids are going from class to class, we'll do the greatest extent possible as far as our social distancing goes. We're going to be keeping all the cleaning protocols we had in place all of last year, right? So wiping down surfaces, having extra custodial coverage in all of our buildings, and wiping, high-touch surfaces throughout the day, bathrooms, all those different things that we did will all happen again. We have MERV 13 filters. We had them all last year for all of our HVAC units. We'll continue to have them again. We have plenty for the year, so we have plenty of supply, and as far as our rotation of when we change them. And as always, which is always good hygiene, we will continue to encourage our students throughout the day to wash their hands, especially at our elementary level. So this just shows you again, last year, in the middle there, the alcohol wipes, and there's actually one on the back table over there. Every classroom had one of those. We have plenty in stock. We have students who wipe down desks when they sit down, wipe down again when they leave. The next group comes in and does the same thing, so we're maintaining that cleanliness. We have folks that are spraying our buses, in between runs as far as elementary and middle school, high-touch services. All those things are going to be in place just like they were last year. So for our lunches, middle school and high school, there will be 2 lunch periods. We are opening up an additional space in our building to utilize so we can socially distance, so not all students will be in here for lunch. We'll use those 2 locations each and every day so we can kind of spread kids out. At elementary, we made the decision that we are going to eat lunch and snack in the classrooms or go outside, weather permitting. So I had a lengthy conversation with Principal Quinones and Miller last week on Thursday, and we talked about utilizing outside as much as we can, especially in the months of September and October before it gets cold. We still have our tents on each of our sites, so they can be utilized as well. The busing I already mentioned, masking when riding on the bus, cleaning between elementary and middle school runs, maintaining physical distancing to the greatest extent practical, and like I said, in the mornings and the afternoons, the high school kids come in first, get out first, so in between those runs, before we go to elementary, we'll be cleaning the buses. We will be changing classes at elementary. We will go back to normal. So last year, if you recall, all the special area teachers came into their classroom through Zoom, so whether it was Spanish or music class, we will be actually changing and going to those spaces and making sure that we're disinfecting those spaces as well in between classes to keep everyone clean and safe. And we're going to minimize sharing of supplies, so things like art supplies, single use, or here's your set for the year for a student, and you're not going to be sharing that with anyone else. You'll be using them all year long for class. So NJ, DOE, so these are exclusion criteria that comes, these are not ours, these are right from the road forward, coming from the state health department. So if we have a student who either has symptoms of COVID, or let's say is tested positive for COVID, we're basically going to be following similar protocols that we followed last year. So we'll be having that student stay home for 10 days from the onset of symptoms, right, and hopefully getting tested, and then making sure that there's no medications that are needed to hold down a fever. If the person tests positive, again, and they're asymptomatic, so if they have no symptoms, keep in mind that the exclusion starts from the date of the test, so a little bit different. If they have symptoms, the 10 days starts from the onset of the actual symptoms. If they don't have any symptoms, it starts from the day they actually tested positive. And then again, if there's an alternate diagnosis, we're still going to require a COVID test just to make sure that we're in a good place. So, as with last year, depending upon orange or yellow, orange or red, we had some flexibility. So if we went into high range and we were in a bad spot across the state or in Hunterdon County, then we're looking at 14 days for excluding like we did last year. But if we're in the yellow or the green, then we're looking at 10 days with the possibility of coming back on day 7 or day 8 if you do a negative test in between days 5 and 7. So that's important. So let's say you're considered to be a close contact. You can't go get tested the next day, right? You have to wait in between, because there's an incubation period for the virus. You got to wait between days 5 and 7. You get tested, let's say on day 5, you get a negative test. You can come back on day 7, 8, or 9, a little bit earlier than the 10 days. Now, this verbiage that's underneath is new as of Friday. All right, so when we talk about close contacts, in the K-12 indoor classroom setting, Close contact definition excludes students who are within 3 to 6 feet of an infected student, where both the infected student and the exposed student correctly and consistently wore well-fitted masks the entire time. So what we're saying is, if they're within 3 to 6 feet in a classroom, and they all have their masks on, including the student who, let's say, is positive, those students that are all within 3 to 6 feet around that have all had their masks on do not need to be excluded. Now, if the masks are off, that's a different story. So that's going to come into play with lunch and snack. So that's the reason why we have to be careful and go outside as best we possibly can so we can social distance students apart. If they're closer than 3 feet, they're 2 feet, which hopefully the way our rooms are set up, they shouldn't be, then that's a different story where we'd have to contact trace and they would be excluded. But there is a little bit more flexibility that was given by the Department of Health compared to what it was last year. So what happens if a student is excluded from school due to COVID? So what we're going to do is, similar to like last year, we will, within a 24-hour time period, set that student up on synchronous remote learning, which means that we've already told all of our teachers to have a Zoom link set up before school even starts and ready to use in the event that you were to find out that 1 or 2 of your students was going to be out for 10 days. So, quite honestly, schools are doing this very differently. We felt very strong that, let's say if you're a close contact and you're out for 10 days, it's not fair not to give you that same instruction. It wasn't your fault, right? So we need to provide as much as we can as the experience of being in the classroom. So what will happen is you'll Zoom in, just like last year we did for students who were remote the entire year. We're at the middle school and the high school. We had the cohorts before we brought everybody back. Same concept. The teacher would have that Zoom link and we'd be ready to rock and roll. Now, we're only providing that for COVID-related reasons. We're not providing that for anything else, so a vacation or this or that. It's only going to be a situation where we're dealing with COVID-related quarantines. What about a teacher? All right? What if a teacher is excluded? Well, basically, if the teacher's well enough, we're going to have them teach from home like we did last year for some of our staff that had some medical challenges and they were out for most of the year. So they'll come in through Zoom to the class. We'll have a sub that's in the room to help supervise the kids, get the projector up and running, and they'll teach their lessons. If they're ill and they can't, then obviously, we'll have a sub in the room and we'll react accordingly. Now, hot off the press, if you haven't been following along, the governor announced this afternoon that he is mandating that all education folks have to be vaccinated. All school employees, so not just teachers, everyone, custodial, food service, office staff, whoever. The date for that is October 18th. So the option is, there's one of 2 options. Either you're vaccinated by October 18th. If you're not vaccinated, you're going to be required to be tested once a week, maybe even twice a week. They haven't made a decision on that. So that is something that just came down today. The good news is, as we ended the school year, we were about 90% at that point of teachers that were fully vaccinated. So that's a really good thing for us, and I imagine that number's probably even higher now. That was back in late May. All right, so what if a student or a staff member is vaccinated, all right, and they're exposed to someone who tests positive? Well, if they're exposed and they're fully vaccinated and they have no COVID-like symptoms, they do not have to be excluded. So they can come to school the next day. So a lot of it's going to be the nurse typically takes the lead on these contact tracing. She's going to wind up calling up, the parent just to see, first if they're vaccinated, maybe the nurse has that. We'll talk about that in a second, that information, and then making sure that they don't have any symptoms. Now, the CDC did come out last week with a change to this, and they recommended that even though they don't have any symptoms, you still should get a test in between days 3 and 5 if you were exposed. A lot of that obviously has to do with the Delta variant. So what's going to happen is our nurses are going to call you up if it's the case and your child's vaccinated, and the nurse is going to say, hey, we're going to recommend that they get tested. That's going to be up to you to decide. We're not excluding them, all right? But we are going to recommend, as per the CDC, that you get tested, just to be safe. You should monitor for symptoms over a 14-day period. So even though in the beginning there are none, if by 10 or 11 there is, then you would need to isolate and kind of go through what anyone else would need to go through and contact, obviously, your healthcare provider. We did provide, and hopefully you saw it already, when you went in to fill out all the forms, when everything came out last Thursday, There is a check off in Aspen, a field where you can check off whether or not your child has been vaccinated. That is volunteer. You don't need to do that. But why is it important? Well, if we do have a situation where we need to contact trace and our nurse has that information available, it's going to speed up the process where she can rule kids out pretty quickly rather than going one by one, which takes more time. So we've already determined our back to school nights are pretty early in the year. They are going to be virtual like last year. So our teachers will be working on videos and be sharing that information out. And then we've also made the decision that our parent-teacher conferences for pre-K-6 will also be the same as last year, virtual using Zoom. So we'll set up appointments and you'll do everything through Zoom. Because I have a feeling that over the next 3 months we'll probably be in the same situation. Therefore, we're not going to take any chances, at least through the fall. So this is something new that I'm introducing. It's going to be on our website, on the home page. We're going to have a COVID tracker. So this will actually on a daily basis be updated. I want to be fully transparent with the community. So if we have cases, you'll be able to see, how many cases are in each building. Is it a student? Is it a staff member? Other could be, a parent or something had to come in for a meeting and then all of a sudden we find out they're positive, whatever it may be. So this will be something that will be available to you from day one that you can see just to kind of, get an idea of where we are. Now, I will say, and I want to reinforce this, that last year we did a great job. Our staff did a great job. We really didn't have any in-school transmission whatsoever of COVID. The only, I'll call it in-school transmission, is we had an unfortunate breakout with our basketball team. But I'm not taking the blame for that because I wasn't going to say who it was.
Jeremy kids from Del Valle.
I wasn't going to say who it was. But we did have a situation where we were playing another school and found out 3 days later that most of their team tested positive. And then all of our team tested positive just about. But we were fortunate that it was over President's Weekend and we were able to confine it and then we had no in-school transmission. So that is a really good thing. That means our protocols that we have in place now. I'm hoping it's the same this year. We're going to do everything possible for that to happen, but I think it's important to reiterate that because I know that there's some angst among parents about sending kids back the way things are going right now. All right, so that is my update. I'm going to open it up to the board for any questions. Jim, go ahead.
I don't have a question, Tony, but I do think it would be interesting. We were talking about the scale, the yellow and the red scale from the CDC and the yellow. You mentioned in one of our committee meetings this week a statistic that Mr. Marco had given you with regard to where the infections are this time around versus where they were last fall, and I think that would be great for the public to know that.
Thank you, Jim, for reminding me. So last Tuesday, we had a roundtable meeting with all the superintendents in Hunterdon County, and we met with the health department. And they informed us at that time that as of last Tuesday, we were averaging about 19 positive cases a day in Hunterdon County. Compared to this time last year, we were averaging 100. So because of the CDC and the way they're reporting now, which is a little bit different, because one thing I should have mentioned with the CDC, those two metrics that they're using, based on those metrics, they take whatever's the highest. So you could be in red for one and blue for the other, but rather than average them out in between with the color, it defers to the highest, to red. So Karen really wanted to kind of clarify that and to let us know that right now, that's what we're averaging. So it's just important to hear that because obviously 19 is a heck of a lot better than 100, and I hope that that's the way it continues as we move forward. So Jim, thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions from the board? All right, so we are at public comment. So I just have something I'm going to read first about public comment, and then we will start with in-person public comment first. And then I know, just looking at the Google form, that I have a bunch from home as well that we'll kind of go through. But before we get started, I just want to remind folks that we have procedures and requirements that include standards of conduct that need to be followed by members of the public during public comments. If a member of the public becomes disruptive during the public meeting, including during the period for public comment, the member of the board charged with running the public meeting shall warn the disruptive member of the public that continued disruption may result in being prevented from speaking during the public meeting or removed from the public meeting. Disruptive conduct includes sustained inappropriate behaviors such as, but not necessarily limited to, shouting, interruption, and use of profanity or comments seen as abusive, obscene, or defamatory. Members of the public are invited to address the board on any matter for a maximum of 3 minutes during this portion of the meeting. You are asked to state your name and municipality. Public comment is now open, and I'll be using our timer as we've done in the past. Yep, you can come right up to the podium.
Yeah.
Name and municipality.
My name's Paul DiBenedetto. I'm from Lambertville. And for one, I just think the whole COVID reaction is hysterical, as is not many children are dying from COVID, right? If school is all about the children, I think, you shouldn't, not many of them are dying. It's not. Even in the country, I mean, this is no yellow fever of 1793. When this yellow fever hit Philadelphia in 1793, it killed 10% of the population in 2 months' time. Right? Now that's a real pandemic, and that's something to get hysterical about. But so far in the United States, there's about 600,000 dead. If you divide 330 million Americans by 600,000 deaths, the incidence of death is less than 1 in 500. All right? And that's why we're all running around wearing masks and carrying on, having to do PCR tests, and running around like a bunch of fools, right? Because of this hysteria over what is actually a very low mortality. There's no perspective here. And I really do believe our founders would be ashamed of what cowardice we are today. They really would. I mean, putting on masks and masking children when no children really are dying from this. It's hysterical. And so, and here's another point. We have this, we're talking about Governor Murphy. And if you're going to buy into logic of how horrible it is, well, Governor Murphy is a failure. Why? Because New Jersey has the highest death rate per capita of all the states in the United States. So when he puts out an edict and demands all the children to wear a mask, we should remember it's coming from the biggest failure in the United States. Because New Jersey is number 1 in COVID mortality. So why you want to listen to a failure, I don't understand. Right? I don't get the logic here. And so I just really am kind of disgusted. I'm ashamed by fellow Americans. If you even call yourselves that, you'll call yourselves that. But you're not acting manly. You're not acting like our founders would. Hysterical over an incidence of 1 out of less than 500 people dying out of the population? Were you going to muzzle children and make them wear a mask? Because what? Because we're afraid the elderly are going to die? The elderly are what? They're not going to live an extra 2 years? And so you're going to smother the mouths of children, and you call it virtue. That's the really shameful part for all of you. Because you go along with it. You enable them. You don't rebel. You don't try to tell the governor or point out what a bunch of fools these people are, including the CDC. And I mean, just look at what's going on with the vaccinations now. You got to get your vaccination, and guess what? Now they're saying, well, the vaccination.
Sir, your time's up. You got 3.
Yeah.
You only get 3 minutes.
All right.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Any more public comment? Sure.
Hi, good evening. Patty Katz, Lambertville. I just have maybe 2 or 3 quick questions. One is I saw the policy about masks that you put up tonight and the reopening plan, and it talks about high aerobic activity with gym class, masks are off. And I was just curious, was that something that the district decided, or what was the reason behind it that for high aerobic to be done in the building versus outside the building, or mask on and off? So that's my one question. And I'm curious, just personally, my kids are signed up and got chorus, what chorus will be mask on and off. I obviously understand the instrument. And then the last thing is just if someone does have symptoms, I understand it's all COVID related for virtual, but if somebody is not feeling well and they end up being home, 2-3 days, they test negative, is virtual even going to be an option for those students? Those are kind of
So I'll answer those. So the first one about the PE classes, that actually came right from the road forward. From the road forward and the governor, in his announcement. Chorus classes, so I've been having a lot of conversations with Erica Krim about that. Obviously last year I know her tact was to take kids outside as much as she could to sing outside. There has been guidelines that have come out from the National Choral Association, basically talking about social distancing in a choral room, and also we've taken a look at our ventilation, specifically different factors that go into it, making sure that we have a certain type of ventilation in those areas for singing, which I'm happy to report that we do, because we've already looked into that. So the intention would be, I think it would be a combination where we would sing outside as much as we can. There probably will be some singing inside. As far as kids singing with masks on and not masks on, last year we did sing with masks on. I know it's harder, but more than likely that will probably happen again. And then your last question about the virtual, we're going to be flexible. If it's COVID-like symptoms, then we're saying you can't come to school, then we're going to provide the remote, right? And we're going to provide it as quickly as we can within those 24 hours. And then I'm hoping, honestly, if the student's out for 3 or 4 days, I'm hoping they test negative. And then obviously we bring them back. But within that time period, we're going to provide the remote instruction. So our teachers know it's going to be very flexible, knowing that one day, and that's why we did build in the 24 hour, just so we have some time, especially with our lower elementary. It's not as easy, just, first of all, navigating with our kindergarten students who, maybe not even used to Zoom yet, because depending upon where they were last year. And then also sometimes there's handouts and materials and even a device, right? So we've worked through policies and procedures where, let's say a student goes home and they're in second grade and they don't have a device, right? Because they don't take them home with them. And all of a sudden they're not feeling well that evening. So that next morning, we're gonna have to figure out how to get the device to the parent. So whether the parent comes and picks them up in the vestibule, so if the parent's not coming in the building, we're kind of working through all those logistics of how that would work.
So can I just further comment? I just think back to the Olympic and understand the governor. It's just, I guess in the past, with the knowledge and the science in that industry, they talk about, singing or high energy. And I guess I would just say we really, really try and emphasize as much high aerobic outside, and then maybe less inside, just because I think that, going back, maybe makes sense to keep it on and do lower inside and higher outside.
Yeah, I would say our PE classes, there's no reason why they shouldn't be outside, especially in the fall. Until we can't go outside, take advantage of it.
And of course, well, there will be an optional mask on all on.
Your time is up.
Yeah. Any other public comments? Come on.
I'm SHRSD from Lambertville, and I know in the next part of the meeting, policy and resolution 7440 is going to come up for a vote, and I'm going to ask the board to please vote no on it. I've read it, I'm really concerned about it. As the board, I'm sure knows, I really believe we should have police officers in our school. And one of the main reasons for that is, and this is in the policy, and it has to be because it's not up to the board to put this in, this is the state of New Jersey, says, a class 3 special law enforcement officer is authorized to exercise full powers and duties similar to those of a permanent, regularly appointed full-time police officer. In other words, ultimately, the district, the board, can't actually determine what an officer does. They're not employed by the district. They're not supervised by the district. They're not subject to the district's chain of command. And they are accountable to the police. So if they want to make a law enforcement decision, ultimately they can. So if we're going to have officers, then we need a policy and a regulation that are as narrow as possible and as specific. And the policy and regulation as they're written right now are incredibly vague and empty. We've spent years making comments about what we expect, what our experiences are, what we've seen, and they run the entire gamut from not wanting officers in at all, negative experiences, to mentors, counselors, as much time as possible together. And nothing in this policy and regulation officer to come into an unruly classroom, and the officer says to a kid, you need to sit down and stop talking. Is that discipline? It is to me, but it would never end up in a discipline report. And if somebody asks an officer for help in that way, what's going to happen if the officer says no? So things like that need to be clear. I was also really sad because we've had people speak up at meetings and share, particularly parents who have, parents of color, parents who have concerns. They talked about their fears and their concerns. They talked about negative experiences, personal experiences, and experiences that their kids have had. And what they related is backed by a ton of research, which has also come up again and again and again. And ultimately, it doesn't matter who we hire. Often, things can be prevented based on personalities, but it's a bigger problem than that. It's the presence of police. So until we have a very clear, narrow policy, I ask you to vote no and go back and redo it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, my comments are, I'm Sean Ellis from Lambertville. My comments are also about the policy 7440. I'll just make 2 quick points. I support everything that Shara said, and I couldn't have said it better. But I do want to emphasize that as much as people may think that, the superintendent, the district, the Board of Ed has control over the police officers, no matter what the policy says, it's not true. They answer to the police departments, and they've already broken terms of the service agreement, and there have been no consequences. There's no accountability there. We haven't heard anything more, and so with that, because there are no consequences and they can't be held accountable, I support the complete removal of the Class 3 officers, not a policy revision that is going to provide to not have any teeth if it's broken, right? So with that said, if the Board of Ed is not willing to remove the Class 3 officers entirely, then they should at the very least include an accountability provision in the policy. And that provision would be that the contracts with the Class 3 officers or with the police department and the school district would terminate if any of the terms were violated. So I ask if you are going to vote for a policy to please include some accountability provision, and that would be that the contracts are terminated if they are broken. Okay, thank you.
Hello, I'm Guy Arvesino. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. This is going to be the most millennial thing I do this year, read it off my phone. I want to second Sean and Shara's sentiments about the policies and regulations. And I wanted to add that this is a little bit of a different take here. I wanted to start by saying strong communities make police unnecessary, I believe. The South Hunterdon School District is a strong, close-knit community. There are many aspects of it that are loving and compassionate. I'm thinking about the shared community moments we all have together at LBA basketball at the church, baseball in the spring and summer at the park in Lambertville. And most importantly, I'm thinking about our schools. In these shared moments, we clearly see our strong community that works together and looks out for each other. However, I believe that when the board chose to add police officers to the schools, it has actually begun to possibly weaken our community. And I understand, and actually my son read this, and he astutely said, well, people are going to say that these police are part of our community. And yes, a lot of these officers are part of our community, but they also represent an institution of policing. And the institution of policing is fraught with the history of racism. I understand that we want to trust that the police in our community do not bring this, ingrained racism into their work. And I hope that is true. And I think we do have a lot of good people in the police in our community. But we can't ignore or deny the presence of police. Any police can have the negative effect on students of color. We've seen reports about this, studies about this. We've sent you information about this to look over. Which in turn, this creates an inequitable environment in our schools. This is clearly antithetical to Mr. Sugo's equity plan. Knowing this, I am suggesting and advocating for the reallocation of the money that is being spent on police and the surveillance cameras for that matter, to develop and offer more courses that teach or incorporate social equity and social justice, and to provide consistent and reliable transportation for after-school activities for all students, particularly for the choice students, which I know the school relies on for numbers in our schools. I mean, you can't deny our school system is losing students. In my son's class alone, kids are going and choosing to go to other schools. There's many different reasons for that, I understand, but we have to consider what's happening. I want to end the statement with a statement by the late Congressman John Lewis. When you see something that is not right, not just, not fair, you have a moral obligation to say something. Do something. Our children and their children will ask, what did you do? What did you say? We have a mission and a mandate to be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Any more public comment? Go ahead.
Hi, Jackie SHRSD from Lambertville. I just had, for starters, I want to thank the board for how they've dealt with COVID in these times. I really appreciate that everyone is relying on facts and science, not political rhetoric. So thank you for the excellent job that you're doing. I know we're in some ever-changing times, and you guys have really done a phenomenal job, and I appreciate that. I have two questions on kind of a different subject. If the referendum doesn't pass, which I hope it will, what happens to that $6.7 million? Like, do we get to use it for something else, or is it only for the referendum?
It's gone. It goes back to the state.
Okay. And so that's a good point that people should know. Also, with the upcoming election, I feel like, and maybe I'm confusing myself, at some point we had something where we had board members talk, or potential board members, or was that for an open seat?
Open seat.
Oh, okay.
That
So
was
we don't do anything, do we do anything for,
Not right
it's just
now.
up to
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
individual community members?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. It's just something. Thank you guys very much.
What?
Michael Strauss from West Amwell. I just wanted to go back and touch on the Class 3 officers. So I think everyone kind of knows where my position is on this, but I do want to say, I saw your letter, and you really had a lot of great points in there. To incorporate that into a policy, though, I'm not quite sure where that is, and I wanted to get some.
What's that?
You have to address the board.
So I wanted to get some. I am addressing the board. I wanted to get some inquiry as far as whether that should be in a policy or in a contract. So we do kind of have to draw the line of where the Class 3 officers are, but is that appropriate for a policy, or is that appropriate for the contract that is called for in the policy?
What I would say is, I mean, here's what I'll say about the policy and the regulation that is up for vote tonight. We put a lot of time and energy into that. This isn't something that we took lightly. We've been basically talking about it for 2 months, including our retreat that we had last week, where we spent a great deal of time going through, getting input. We've gotten input from the community. So what I will say to you is that, as far as being the superintendent of this district, I'm very comfortable with being recommended for approval tonight. I think it very much tightens things up. There was nothing like that we even had in the past, quite honestly. So now that we have a policy and regulation that has a lot of different components that will eventually be shared with the community and our students, for that matter.
Okay, thank you. And I do think I see the progress in the policy. I know that it didn't exist. I congratulate you guys on taking that step, and I know that there is further steps that we do need to take, but just we want to get the Class 3 officers approved. I know that we're waiting on this to approve them, the Class 3 officers.
Well, they're
in
approved,
there.
they're as part
Well,
of the budget.
there was a budget item that still hadn't carried over, that we were waiting on this policy, and I think the policy should move forward. I do think that the contract also needs to be spelled out a little bit more.
Agreed. Any other in-person public comment?
I am Carrie Brown, Lambertville. There's a bunch of us tonight that are talking about the Class 3 officers. I'm also one of them. And I know that it might seem like we're repeating ourselves, but I think it's important for the board to know that there are a lot of us in the community who do not agree with the Class 3 officers in the school. And to that end, there are a lot of students who do not feel comfortable. Our kids were surveyed, and about 80% of the black students indicated that they were scared or they didn't want the officers. I don't know what was done with that. The board had a discussion with Dr. Webb earlier, I don't know how many months ago, who concluded that everyone needs more information and education on the role of the Class 3 officers. And I don't know where that led. I find that the role of the Class 3 officers is incredibly unclear, like Shara stated. And until it is more defined, I as a parent feel very uncomfortable. So I can only imagine how a parent of a child of color or a parent of color would feel. Thanks.
Any other in-person?
Hi, I'm Corky Brown from Lambertville. I would ask the board to vote no on the Class 3 officers. For months we've asked what the role would be. It's been very ambiguous. I'm not even sure what maybe if you could define the role. I haven't really gotten a straight answer. It's sort of been implied that it's security, but security from what? I'd like to hear exactly what we're providing security for. I think that should inform the role, especially when children of color are negatively, disproportionately affected by the presence of an officer, not just in terms of mental health and behavior, but it can be dangerous. There are studies, numerous studies that have proven that children of color are negatively affected by officers being in their schools. If we can't justify their presence to begin with, I don't really understand why they're there, and that's where I would like to start. So maybe you can answer that, but our group here, we do have a petition we'd like the public to sign. We are nothing short of removing the officers will be adequate for our group. Thank you.
Jessica Hardigan, West Amwell. As a parent who spends a great deal of time in the schools, I mean, not last year, but to me, I've never seen an officer overstep. I've never seen them go, I don't know, overboard. I mean, to me, that's the principal's responsibility. That's why we have administrators in our buildings. I mean, to me, I don't need anyone to define what the Class 3 officer's role is. I believe that back when we started this journey, it was a step towards defending our buildings. We don't have bulletproof glass. We don't have safe vestibules. Do we need to do more? Yeah, we do, but that's why we're going out to referendum. That's why we're building new school buildings, to protect our students and provide more educational experience for them. I think that it would be really irresponsible of all of us to remove basically our only line of defense for an active shooter. I mean, is it the principal and the secretary's responsibility? No, it's not. And if we remove that, what do we have? We have police officers that are 10 minutes away. I mean, I think a lot can happen in a very short amount of time, and I don't think that's something that we should do. I think that we should be responsible and protect our kids. Thank you.
Just one thing I wanted to clarify for everyone that's here tonight. The policy and the regulation that's up for approval has nothing to do right now with whether or not we will or will not have Class 3 officers this school year. That has already been approved. That is part of our budget. There will be Class 3 officers for the 2021-22 school year. The policy and regulation is just based on their role and what they actually do on a daily basis, not whether or not we're going to have them. So I do want to clarify that. Is there anything else, any other public comment? In person? You would have to wait to the next one, guys. You can only do one per public comment round. All right, so I am then going to look at our form from home and see. We do have 11, it looks like. I will go through.
One of them's not, you don't have to.
Okay. So the first one I have, it looks like it's from Wanda Cameron from Lambertville. So what are the parents supposed to do that don't feel safe sending their children back in person? I feel that due to the Delta being more contagious than the regular strain of the virus, that this year's parents should have the option of remote learning or a hybrid. Children are not able to get the vaccine. Others are afraid of returning to school, afraid to contract the virus, or afraid they will contract the virus and bring it home to their parents or other people in the household with underlying conditions. I, for one, is considering homeschooling my child if remote learning or hybrid is not a choice for this year. So obviously, that's not our decision. That's the state of New Jersey's decision, and the decision has already been made by the governor that all students will be in school this year full day. Next one is from Amy Faust, West Amwell. What is going to happen with the students and parents that don't feel comfortable with sending their children in person yet? There are no virtual learning anymore. That is correct. So there is not an option. The only real option a parent would have if they're, totally uncomfortable and do not want to send their child back, they could have the option of homeschooling, which basically means that they would withdraw their child from school and take care of their education on their own at home. But again, I just want to reinforce what I said earlier. We were very fortunate last year where we didn't have any in-school transmission, and our hope is that that will continue. That's from the same parent, so I'll save that for the next one just because you can only have one per public comment. The next one is Susan Ravello, who is from Lambertville. I have attended many board meetings where the Class 3 police officers in the schools was discussed. The response to those concerns was woefully inadequate. In fact, they were downright misleading. It seems that the job descriptions allow the officers a tremendous amount of leeway in their interactions with students' roles. They have no training in. The survey results that showed that students of color are uncomfortable with the police presence was never made public because it did not support the administration's wish to keep them in schools. Studies show that having police in schools, no matter how friendly they are, has a negative impact on students of color, and they don't make students any safer. I would like them removed from the schools altogether. Guy we had already, Melissa Clark, and other, so it could be choice. The pre-K team has some questions on the social distance since the new reports came out. What is the distance the students have to be in the classroom since the kids are not vaccinated? I already kind of talked about that. 3 feet is what we'll be looking at. Also, do the students have to be distanced and wearing masks during their rest time? I'm assuming, is that like nap time? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would think no, because obviously that could impact their ability to breathe, depending upon their age. So we would make sure they were social distanced. That's our same parent, so that's the third one, which actually we won't be able to read because you're only allowed one. All right, Paul Fries, Lambertville. A comment and a question. With every New Jersey county now in the red for community transmission, a much higher number of daily reported cases than at this time last year, and a more infectious variant that puts our kids at greater risk, than any other time during this pandemic. It is unacceptable that parents are not being given a virtual learning option. Having said that, shouldn't we be making in-school mitigation measures more stringent than they were last year? The Delta variant creates a riskier climate for our children. Why are we relaxing some of our mitigation measures? I mean, I don't think we're relaxing our mitigation measures. We're following everything as far as the road forward and state health guidance and CDC guidance. I think we know more than we did, obviously, this time last year about the virus, and that's the reason why the recommendations have come out. So we're not making them up. We're following everything that was given from various outlets that know a lot more about it than we do. This might have been, I wonder if this was, sorry. Oh, yeah, it is, so I'll read it. On behalf of the LAF, we welcome grant applications from faculty for the 21-22 school year. Grant application is on the website, www.laf.org. Also, the annual golf day is Monday, October 4th. We're looking for local sponsors. If anyone knows businesses or individuals who are interested, registration will be opening in the coming weeks. Sorry about that email. So that's the same parent for the fourth time. Fifth time. So, all right. So I'm going to, I can get back to my agenda. All right. Public comment is now closed. Buildings and grounds. Diana?
So we have on the 19th, so just this week. One of the biggest things we're moving is just how the resolution is on the ballot. So once we approve it, I believe it goes to Mary Melfi and then it's official. So that's exciting. Other than that, just an update. I know Cody and Andrew met with Mashios to talk about the school year, and I know we talked about a bunch of times healthier snack options. And I believe you mentioned you were going to present that to school community.
That is correct.
Other than that, sorry, I'd like to move item A. J. Yep. Second.
Roll call vote. Lauren Von Schoenfeld?
Yes, sir. Discussion. I'm sorry.
Apologize.
Well, if there's any
Nope,
discussion.
No, my fault.
Nope.
All right, sorry, jumping the gun. Lauren Von Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Martha Dennis? Jim Gallagher?
Yes.
Tracy Chuli?
Yes.
Diana Purcell?
Yes.
Ronnie Todd Marino? Ronnie Todd Marino?
Yes.
Megan Warner?
Yes.
Kevin Kowaleski? Kevin Kowaleski?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, personnel. I'll just give an update. So obviously it's a very important time with school starting on September 1st. So we had a few hires that we're recommending to the board on our agenda this evening. I'm happy to report that we are fully staffed and we're ready to go. Our teachers actually come back on Wednesday this week, Wednesday and Thursday. So we have a pretty full schedule on Wednesday and Thursday of professional development that we'll be doing with our staff. And then today we actually did a professional development with our administrative team and also a group of teachers as part of one of our goals this year, which will be blended and personalized learning, which I'll talk more about in September. And then tomorrow we actually have a administrative team leadership training for all of our administrators, which I'm excited about. So, you know, the summer has come to a close. We're ready to bring back our kids, and we're fully staffed in order to be able to do that. That's personnel. And I guess
I'll make a motion as item A and B. Second.
quite a list of substitutes.
I was just gonna say,
Yeah, it's
I
great.
asked if the list was as long as it was last year, and you said no, right?
It's longer, I think.
It's longer.
Yeah. Which is good. That's a good thing.
Roll call vote. Lauren Brontrumpo,
Yes.
Martha Dennis,
Yes.
Jim Gallagher,
Yes.
Tracy Patchouli,
Yes.
Diana Purcell,
Yes.
Donnie Tomarino,
Yes.
Megan Warner,
Yes.
Kevin Kowaleski.
Yes.
Curriculum, technology,
Yes. All right. So tonight we have items A through F for approval, and I'll give some details and some information that I think will be of interest to the community. So a couple of things that are exciting for us. We continue to see the development of new curricula, which expands our program, deepens and adds, I think, a really important equity lens to the work that we're doing in all of our fields in school at different grade levels, as well as addressing some areas that we have identified as areas for growth, for instance, in our science and technology curricula and math as well, so and social studies. So I think that's all reflected on tonight's agenda, as well as what we've been seeing over the last couple of years in my term at least. So there's, again, a number of different courses. I did want to highlight that we're seeing social emotional learning competencies aligned in the new curricula that are coming out, and that we also have Mr. Hewitt has a pretty robust plan for in-service days where teachers are going to be collaborating with each other across grade levels, so that's helping our articulation plans across buildings as well as across different fields, and looking at things not just about translating the curricula into their classrooms, but also things like what's on the walls and what's displayed. So they're really thinking really critically about what students are seeing and experiencing in their day-to-day lives, not just in the instruction. I also want to highlight that there are 2 new extracurricular opportunities. So there's a yarn club that's going to start for middle school, high school students, which I think will be a really great opportunity for students to get involved in at those grade levels. And then there's also for 4th to 7th grade students, there's going to be a Lego robotics team that will be meeting in person with COVID, following COVID protocols, and that will be meeting at West Amwell School. So if you have a student who is in those grade levels 4 through 7, then that is a program that they can sign up for this fall, and it's going to go to a competition, which this year the theme is about reimagining the future of transportation. So I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. There are significant technology updates also described in the minutes, which I won't read back, but just noting that we've got a bunch of new production. We got TV production, gaming, computer science, workshops, all set up and ready for students and teachers to utilize up here at the high school when they come back. And I did also want to highlight something that's not necessarily always part of my report, but we have had some goals for the committee that got shunted aside because essentially, COVID, one of our goals had to do with classroom furniture and really trying to update particularly the physical spaces in which students have to learn. And so we're really excited to be able to report that the blended learning cohort that will be starting this year, that 2 teachers in that pilot in 2 classrooms have been selected to outfit with collaborative learning furniture, and that is also using the ESSER funds, federal funds. So at no cost to the district will be able to finally make some specific progress on that goal, which I think is really exciting. So after that, there's the school choice program. All but 3 grade levels will be open coming next year, and our new director of math, science, and special projects right? Is that title?
K-12 supervisor STEM.
Thank you. Is going to be working on a new course, which is potentially titled Elements of Pre-Calculus. So again, this will be a way to kind of give our students an edge and capstone their math experience. So I know, again, these are some areas that we have identified both from public comment and also through the administration, areas of growth for curricula. So I'm excited to share those updates tonight. And so with that, I make a motion to move items A through E for approval. F is the minutes. So A through E, right? Yes. Okay, new system.
And I will second the motion.
Thank you. Okay. So, and if we have any discussion from the board.
I'll just mention one addition to your comprehensive report, and that is Mr. Stevens is the band director at South Hunterdon. He has been the band director for 3 years. He came and replaced Mr. Smith, who was here for 36 years. And I'll tell you, Mr. Stevens has done a fantastic job. He has revitalized that band program. I mean, it's a pleasure to watch and hear them perform and play, and the energy that he brings to it. So I am thrilled with this opportunity that he is working on his master's program. Our band is going to be participating and helping him, and he is going to be helping them. I think it's a great thing. I will also note Mr. Stevens is a graduate of the school. He is an alumni of South Hunterdon. So very proud. He's a person that this district should be very proud of, and so I wanted to mention it.
Thanks for highlighting that, Jim. Mr. Stevens will be doing action research for his master's degree within the classroom for the band, and I think that's exciting, and we'll certainly benefit from that in his school. Thank you for highlighting that.
Discussion? Roll call. Lauren Von Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mark Dennis?
Yes.
Jim Gallagher?
Yes.
Mr. Chuli?
Yes.
Diane Russo? Yes. Bonnie Todd Marino?
Yes.
Megan Warner?
Yes.
Kevin Kowaleski?
Yes.
Okay. The policy committee met this evening. I'm going to make 2 motions this evening, so I will make a motion now to approve the first reading for 3 policies. Policy 1648, Policy and Regulation 7432, and Policy 5116. So I'll be looking for a second and we can discuss.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the first reading of these policies. Policy 1648 is merely to put into place the school opening that it's aligned with everything that Mr. Souza spoke about in his report tonight. So this is the first reading. You will have the opportunity to go home, take a look at that. If you have any concerns, contact us before the next policy meeting. The eye protection policy is simply related to classes, for example, chemistry classes or classes where there might be dangerous chemicals that, students and the teachers are required to wear the proper protection. The education of homeless children, that is, also covers if there are children who, are left homeless or, lose their home in the district. Our practice here at South Hunterdon has always been to continue to provide for those children until they can get on their feet. So this is, it's a state-required policy. It's something that we have done in the past. So I will ask if there is any questions on those. And if there is no questions on those, then I'll ask that call for a vote on those.
So we're voting on the first reading.
We're voting on item A, the first reading of the policy.
Lauren Von Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Mark Dennis?
Yes.
Jim Gallagher?
Yes.
Chris Chuli?
Yes.
Diane Russo?
Yes.
Bonnie Todd Marino?
Yes.
Megan Warner?
Yes.
Kevin Kowaleski?
Yes.
Okay. I separated these because the second, I will make a motion to approve the second reading and adoption of 4 policies that are listed here under item B. If I could have a second for that, I will discuss. Thank you. Okay, so included on these are policies that we looked at last month, including the policy and regulation 7440, safety and security, policy and regulation 3223, which is related to evaluations of administrators, and policy 3224, evaluations of principals and assistant principals, and a civility policy, which we had discussed previously. The policy and regulation 7440, in the meeting this evening, we did have one small change to the policy that you all had looked at previously. I just want to highlight that. Under the reporting section, there was some additional language added to note that if someone has a concern, that those reports will be confidential. Names of students or whoever makes a report of an issue or a problem, that'll be held confidential. Unless, of course, so that can be investigated, and if it is investigated and found actionable, then action will be taken. But that is the only change to the policy that you had reviewed earlier this week. So I'll open it up for discussion. Is there any discussion on these four policies? Any other discussion on the policy?
Tony, I would like to ask you maybe to share with the public a little bit of an overview of your plan for both introducing the officers in the program to students, as well as monitoring it monthly throughout the year that you laid out in our.
Sure. So a couple things. First off, I did promise the public last year in the spring that we would do a complete review of the program. That will be happening. Last Thursday or Wednesday night when we had our retreat, I shared with the board a pretty extensive review that will start in September and go all the way through the month of December. I'll be sharing that in greater detail next month when we do our district goals at our board meeting. It will involve small focus groups of students, community members, staff, a pretty extensive process. I will be doing that with Mr. Webb, who many of you met, that was with the board and facilitated a board conversation a few months ago. We will be sharing this policy and regulation not only with our community and our parents, but also with our students. So it's really important to be transparent with our students as far as what the role of our Class 3 officers are. So that's something that will be happening in each one of our school buildings to start the school year. And we will be actually doing an introduction of our Class 3 officers, making sure that our students know who they are, because that's something I don't think in the past has actually happened. So that's kind of our goal over the next couple weeks to start the school year, but there'll be a lot of conversations evaluating the program, with myself providing a report back to the board sometime in probably February of 22.
Are there any other comments on the policy? If not, then Andrew will
Lauren Buck-Schoenfeld?
Yes.
Martha Dennis?
Yes.
Dean Gallagher?
Yes.
Chris Petrucci?
Yes.
Diane Crusett?
Yes.
Ronnie Tamarino?
Yes.
Megan Ward?
No.
Kevin Kowaleski?
Yes.
All right. School and community didn't meet this month. There was no meeting or discussion items. We didn't have any, obviously, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. Or we did have, just so you know, and these are two new items that I'll include each month. We did have summer programming in LPS in the high school, so we did have to do our monthly fire and safety drills. That's what goes. And then that brings us to our second public comment. So members of the public are invited to address the board on any matter for a maximum of 3 minutes during this portion of the meeting. You are asked to state your name and municipality. Public comment is now open. Do we have any in-person public comment first? Sheridan?
Just to go back to 7440, listening to what everybody's saying, I I don't think it'll happen tonight, but I would ask if the board at a meeting soon, we've never heard from any of the board individually, what your understanding is of the Class 3 officer program. What do you really expect in terms of day-to-day interactions with our kids? The policy and regulation clearly goes through, making sure doors are locked and those kinds of security measures. But there's a lot of time that the officers are in the school, and I really want to know what the expectation is for how they're interacting with our kids. Because again, there's a lot of openings, and I'm not sure why something would not be in the policy and regulation if it's part of the expectation. When you tell our students, these are the officers, they're going to be checking that the doors are locked, they're going to be, helping with safety drills, it doesn't tell them what they should expect on a day-to-day basis. Are those officers going to be walking around with them in the halls, joining them in their classrooms? I know this isn't the shared services agreement, but as of next week when our children go back to school, the officers are allowed to meet privately in locked offices with our kids. And hopefully that will be changed. But what are we expecting? And it just makes me wonder, is that okay with everybody? Because it's not okay with me. And if that's happening, what's happening in that room? Is that counseling, which is not supposed to be? And if it's not, is it something law enforcement related? In which case, my child is with a law enforcement officer without my consent. So I really am curious. And again, when Dr. Webb was here and had the conversation, my understanding is that he commented that the board doesn't seem to be on one page in terms of, are we trying to create a positive relationship with our students and the police as a way to support the police, create respect? Is that something that everybody agrees we should be doing? Or are we here to try to make our buildings more secure, which is not proven that police officers in schools do that, and in fact, have been instances where they make them less physically safe. If it's more than that, does everybody agree? Or do some people say, no, it's just the security and we don't want additional contact? I would really like to hear what your agreement as the board is on that. Thank you.
The only thing I'd like to respond to that is to say that we don't have Class 3 officers meet with kids in rooms by themselves.
But they're allowed to.
It's not happened and it will not happen.
But it's allowed to.
No, it's not.
It's in the shared services agreement.
And it's never happened.
What's that?
It's never happened.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter.
It won't happen. And I've had, Chair, I've had the conversation with you that we are going to be revising the shared service agreement to match the
But why
regulation.
not put that in the regulation now so that it's done? Like, why not address that now instead of,
Honestly, I think we already have.
But I have it.
I disagree.
Well, factually, it's in the shared services agreement, which is valid right now.
Next public comment?
Sean Ellis, Lambertville. I just have two questions. So thank you for putting the contract renewal clause into the policy on an annual basis to be reviewed and re-voted on, I take it, by the board? Is that, or?
So the agreement that we have with all the municipalities will be approved on an annual basis as a contract, just like we would approve any other contract with a vendor that we were
Okay,
working with.
with a vote by the board. Okay, great, thank you. And then when does that get reviewed each year?
Typically, those will be approved in June of each year.
Okay, except for this year, because it's going to be a new thing, it'll be coming up soon, I imagine?
After it's revised, it needs to be revised and be reflected based on our policy and regulation that we approved this evening.
Okay. So that'll be before June, sometime soon. And then the last question I have is, what are the consequences or how are officers held accountable if they don't follow the policy or the service agreement?
If there was an issue where they violated based on the regulation that we have in place, then obviously we would be reporting that to the lieutenant in charge and then taking action that's quite honestly confidential because it's a personnel matter, just like it would be for a teacher or a custodian, whoever. That's not something we can talk about in public. So there's not, I can't give you a what if. I mean, that's a what if question.
Right, I know, but I think you answered the question that the board has there's nothing that is in place.
We would be part of that conversation.
What's that?
We would be part of that conversation. If there was an issue where something needed to be addressed, obviously our input is extremely valuable to that final remediation.
Right, that the police would take your statements and they would do what they typically do to discipline officers, which is, well, we kind of know how that goes. But, okay, thank you.
Any other public comment? All right, let me see if you, oh, go ahead, Martin.
No. Michael Strauss, West Amwell again. I want to thank the board because, and do a hard turn actually from what I've been hearing. Because there was a lot of stuff I think in the Class 3 officer discussion that we missed. And I think the big part is coming out of the curriculum committee and hearing, as a parent of a child of color, hearing that materials that go up on billboards or on boards in the school, we're actually evaluating that for equity. That means a lot. So last year, Ms. DeZalvi did this really great project where each of the kids was diving into a pool, and all you saw was their legs. Can I tell you what my expectation was? It was that my child's color wouldn't be reflected in that each of the kids would have the same bit of construction paper and they'd actually just be recreated. It didn't happen. She actually went in and she took the time to make sure that each child was reflected correctly. It meant something. It meant something to me as a parent. It meant something to me, to my kid as well. I don't want that to get lost. I also really don't want to get lost. Last year, I wrote to you all and said our libraries also need that same equity. I know that there was an evaluation or there is an ongoing evaluation of that. I want that to continue. I also really want to call out the fact that our board highlighted music and arts tonight as well. We sometimes, I think, get lost in our in policy and lose our humanity. All of that really still matters. It matters in our kids' education. And I thank you for putting in that effort in everything. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Sure.
Hi again, thank you. Patty Maxkin and Katz, Lambertville. Just to get back to the COVID measures, because obviously you're seeing a lot of letters about, fear, sending your child back. And I know last year you guys did an extraordinary job, and I thank you for it. I just wanted to get back to, just in terms of, this 3 feet versus 6 feet, monitoring the buses, because I know, to be honest, kids are taking pictures of themselves on the bus without a mask on. So just overall, in terms of faculty, administration, mindful breaks, just, is there going, because Delta is, spreading faster, because now, last year, we took 6 feet, there are a lot of children, students remote, now it's 3 feet, is that right, not the science? I mean, who really knows if someone sneezes, that idea of how far it spreads? But just to, feel comfortable as a parent sending 2 children into the school who were majority remote last year, who want to be in person and we're going for it, but just anything you can reassure us about, 3 feet, and overall just monitoring as the school year is going to take place. Anything to reassure.
So, I mean, what I'll say is obviously each and every day I have every kid on, you know, they're on my shoulders. Like, I'm responsible for our kids, right? So I take that very, very seriously. So I'm very comfortable with the plan that we have. I'm very comfortable with the mitigation strategies that we have. Our teachers are well versed. You know, what I said to them is, you did this already. You did all last year, so you can do it again. We know a lot more this year than we did this time last year. And I'm really feeling good about our kids coming back, and feeling good that last year we didn't have any in-school transmission, and hoping that that will be the case again. And obviously I'm going to follow the recommendations and be watching and monitoring our data to kind of see where we are. It's something that we talk about every day. You know, and our kids are going to be safe. I feel confident in saying that. And I'm really excited just to be able to see all of them back. I mean, think about it. Our kids haven't had a full day of in-person school since March 13th of 2020. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about that. So I'm letting you know that I'm very confident in the plans that we have.
Thank you.
I just want to echo my colleagues also. I just want to thank you guys for all the work you're doing. I think it does get lost sometimes when we're focusing on this one issue. It's an important issue. I don't want to discount that, but I do recognize the equity stuff we are doing, and I think it's really important. We're just trying to see the whole picture, of course, with the police. But thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thanks. Anything else for in person? All right, let's see if we have any more from home. We have 11 still, but I will go back to our one parent, at least for the second one for her. So this is again Wanda Cameron from Lambertville. I am very concerned about the amount of increases in cases and hospitalizations at this time. Last school year, Murphy made schools hybrid and remote learning due to original strain of the virus. Now we have the Delta, which is spreading more easily. I am not against masks in school, but I'm against all in person. There's no way for kids to social distance 6 feet from each other, and I don't feel 3 feet is good enough. We need to protect our children, just as well as the teachers and the staff in the school. I'm not saying that remote learning is not a struggle, because I, for one, know it is a struggle. I know kids are having a hard time. Some kids need one-on-one attention in school. Kids need to socialize with their friends, but our jobs as parents and the school's responsibilities are to keep kids safe. There are a lot of kids being infected with the virus, and at this point in time, I do not feel that all in-person is safe enough for kids as well as teachers and staff, and mandating teachers and staff to vaccinate is against our rights. Nobody should be forced into doing something they don't feel safe doing. I, for one, as a parent, will not be sending my child to school. If it is full-time in person, I need to protect my child and my family from the virus. Okay. Public comment is now closed.
One second.
Second.
Sorry. All right, let's do a voice vote. All in favor of closing the meeting? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained?
Aye.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a good evening.